I think it was from grade 5. We had this lady, Ausin Nana. She was 26 years old with 3 kids at a time. And she started telling us how her father, rapes her every morning for years now. And I grew up with that. Hi guys and ladies, welcome back to another vlog. I know there was no vlog for yesterday. Of course, it was a Saturday, so I tried to observe the Sabbath. I tried to rest at least one day in a week. So I tried to take it easy, be with family, do all the things that needs to be done just to relax. It's about 4 o'clock in the morning. Why am I up in the morning? Olerato wanted to go and surprise her mother. Which is my mother-in-law. Yes, because we are married, it's a mother-in-law. My mother-in-law, because it's not just Mother's Day, but it's her birthday on the same day. So they decided, they just go drive down there. So they drove down there. But something schleppy just happened as I was picking up the kids, because we stay a little bit higher and we don't have elevators. So we use the stairs going down. And as I was coming down the last flight of stairs, because I was holding the 2 kids and one was walking in front of me. Yes, I have 3 kids. The oldest one, 10-year-old, was walking in front of me. And I'm carrying 5 and a 3. Both my 2 arms, they got blankets. I'm not seeing clearly, because I thought, yeah, I've been using stairs for a long time. Let me just go for it. And I missed the last step. What I did when I missed the last step, I realized that I tried to catch my balance, but it's on steps and you can't see. So I started sliding and I pushed the one in front. She slid down the stairs and I realized that I'm going down the stairs. I had to catch the rail with my hand. I crept onto the rail. It was already too late because 4 o'clock in the morning the kids are screaming. And I felt a little bit horrible in a way. But long story short, what key takeaway was when they got into the car, it was a little bit drizzling also outside. They never said, it's daddy. Daddy made us to fall. They just said, oh mommy, it was just the stairs. The stairs is the one. They hit me here. And there's a different type of accountability when you hear that compared to how I know how we used to do stuff. And it's funny because on the Saturday Olerato had a visitor, which is her friend, and we sat down, we were on the table and we were talking about how we grew up. And she spoke about how she recently saw Yizo-Yizo on Netflix and she watched all of it. And me, I always battle with watching TV and series and stuff. I was like, wow, I'm proud of you, because I just watched Yizo-Yizo, but season 1, because I couldn't finish it back in 1999. Our TV gave up. And she was telling me that, it was appalling seeing all of those things. I'm like, what do you mean? I grew up with those things. And I was telling the other people, because I'm also helping with some other tutors. I had, volunteered there. And I was telling the net tutors the other time that I saw the SABC app pop up. And then I clicked on it and there was Yizo-Yizo and I watched Yizo-Yizo and I finished it. I was quite proud that I could watch and finish Yizo-Yizo in like a matter of days. As she was talking about what's happening on Yizo-Yizo, and I spoke to her about what did I see as I was growing up. And I know people, the first thing that they talk about is, oh, the rape in Yizo-Yizo. And I reflected and I said, when I was in primary, not high school, because Yizo-Yizo is about high school. When I was in primary, we had that. We had the Tulas. Tulas was the older one there. And I said, on my case, when I was in grade 5 or grade 6, grade 5, I can't remember. I think it was from grade 5. We had this lady, Ausin Nana. She was 26 years old with 3 kids at the time. She went all the way. I think it was only when we got to grade 7, because the school stopped at grade 7, that the school said you can't continue anymore. I mean, here is the 13-year-old and you are 26. It makes sense. But I think at the time she's from the homelands in the, I think out of South Africa we call it the country. But she's from the rural areas and she didn't have education. And it was only when her husband came to Welcome that she had an opportunity to, decide to go to school. But at the time, she was already old with 3 kids and stuff like that. And they were staying in some back room somewhere. And I grew up with that. And I told her to say, it was common to have people that were 18-year-old in our class and they would share the stories. And the one in particular, and I was sharing also with my oldest daughter, Kamu. There was this lady, Suzanne. She was about 18 and I was way younger. She came to me and Tele, was my friend. We were just sitting on the other side of the class, and she started telling us how her father, rapes her every morning for years now. Every morning, her father is making poor child a woman, and we were like, huh? Because she's 18, we're thinking, okay, but she's 18, but it's your dad. I mean, it's horrible. And she's like, no, it's not a new thing. It's been going on for years. Now we are starstruck. We're thinking, what do you mean? It's like, no. Her mom went away. It's like she went back to the villages and they were just left with the mom. And remember, my school was in the mining compounds. Cause complas, man. I don't know what you call it. They call it mining compounds. Cause complas, man. It's if you don't understand what it means, it's they build a mine. After they build a mine, there'll be like houses for general workers. And these are houses, not the normal hostel, like proper houses where you can bring family. So they put a school there. That's the school that I went into. But we didn't stay there. We stayed in a different one. We had a more or less like a compound like that. But our one was not because of the mine. It was because of TEBA, which was the Employment Bureau of Africa. It was employing the people. And we stayed in one of those. So my father didn't see anything else wrong with sending us to another school. Besides, it was a good school at its time, but he didn't know that we were seeing what we were seeing. But I think the horrors of apartheid, you wouldn't care what you see. Everywhere there was horror. But we're not talking about apartheid. This was post-apartheid because we're talking about 95, 96, 97, somewhere there. So we had those people. And Suzanne is sharing this story. At the time, we just looked at each other. We said, what do you want us to do? She said, no, nothing. Don't do anything. It's like those things where the kids are just playing, in the playground. Don't say anything. And I said to Sele, what do we do? She said, nothing. Nothing. We never told anybody. The story only comes now, later on, when I was talking to Kamo about, taking seriously whatever your friends is saying. Take it seriously. If they say something incriminating, that the parents are doing something wrong, brothers, uncles, whatever, talk. And then I told her that story, that it never bothered me all these years. Only now when I'm 36 years old, does it bother me because I got daughters. I'm thinking, would I be making a wife of my daughter for those many years? But we didn't understand. And that's the stuff that I know that parts are not in Yizo-Yizo. It's the ones where we have older people coming with, they never used to come with guns. So Yizo-Yizo was the Soweto version. But they used to come with machete. Yeah, machete. Yeah, that's what they call it now. Sababian thing, machete. We used to call it sepcha, big knife, machete. They would come with that. Okapis were everywhere. So if you have an okapi, you just another one. But the machete, yeah, that's the one. It goes with the scepter. And from there, and I remember with the scene of Chester, was it Papa Action with Dudu. I remember more or less the same thing because there was this other guy, Franz, and I think it was in Ngezima. Um, they got arrested. They were a grade above me, grade or two grades, a grade above me. I think I was in grade 5 the way he was in grade 6. So they got arrested because as much as Franz was a chama boy, everybody else thought that Ngezima was the one that was influencing him. But long story short, there was this girl that they gang raped. The girl came, I think they were all friends or whatever, or not friends, I don't know. But they gang raped the girl, and then they all got 2 years in prison. And I remember when Franz came back, we didn't blame Franz as the guys. We were just, yo, he got caught. We were looking at the fact that he got caught and not the fact of what he has done. We're not appalled with what he has, because it was known that people just go and they do that stuff, and people go and steal, and they come and share their stories, because the people that were in my school were not everybody else from the same compound. It was also people coming from the townships who couldn't find space in the township, and they would walk 5, 6, 7 kilometers to come to a compound school to come and attend there, and they would share all of these stories, and they would act what they normally act like in the township, and they would say in the township is worse because there was um, a G hostel where there were guns and stuff. We saw it on TV in the 90s where the military was even there and the guys were fighting the military with guns. And then I thought to myself, you guys are shook about seeing it on TV. And I remember when I saw Bobo on I Blew It, and I was like, and the key takeaway was when the brother was saying, once they saw Bobo and them, Rochester, acting out what they live in Soweto, and they get paid for that, it was like a mind changer. People really made them celebrities. To say, wow, dude, come on. You get to be yourself and you get paid. And not just normally pay. He says he was making about 200,000 a week. 200K. Not a month, a week. And that's how he ended up doing drugs and stuff. And the funny part is, in Yizo-Yizo, he was acting, being introduced to drugs. But that was his real life. So why do you want to crucify people for living their own life? Olorato's friend was like, don't you have trauma growing up now as an adult with what you saw? I was like, no, they are part of me. I don't know anything better but those memories. And I cherish those memories to say, hey, I was friends with whoever. Yeah, they took drugs on the way to school. I was friends with whoever. Oh, the other time, and I was talking about it and laughing because in Yizo-Yizo, they used to smoke bottle cop, which was common at the time. And then they did, in one episode, they did apple cop, which is they bite an apple on both sides and they put marijuana and then they blow through marijuana. I think few days later, I didn't know because we didn't have TV. They did orange cop, so they bit the orange on both sides and they put marijuana and they were drinking, smoking through it. And then they said they were laughing and they said they gave it to somebody else the other time who didn't, and then just who didn't smoke, and he just went crazy. So they were like, "Why don't you give it to Lisema? He's not smoking." But I was working with them every day. It's like, why don't you give it to him? I was like, no, no, don't give it to him. They were laughing over that. And I think all of that and some, because they were taking also some pills. It's later that I realized that they were Mentrax. And I think all of that, because we work with close proximity and not just me getting high. I was working with my nephew, which is younger brother also, because we were that close. He was 6 years old. He was going for grade R. I could just imagine what did those Mentrax do to him. But we were just walking down there. It was part of life. If I don't walk with them, Who will I work with? They are my friends. And they are my friends because where we are walking through that patch of land, it's quite dangerous. Anybody can show up anywhere and stab you. So at least if it's a gang of boys, sometimes we would go with girls also as a protection. When I was also in matric, now I'm in the suburban school. When in matric, and I didn't go for my matric farewell in 2004. I decided, you know what, I know what's gonna happen in matric farewell. Let me just sit it out. In that matric thing, I don't know how I feel about this. The guy who we were RCL together, he asked some girl who was in grade 10, we were in grade 12, to be her partner, to be his partner. So they went together. They went straight into the matric thing. It was all nice. When they went into the after party, the guy's asking, no, girl, you want to go? The girl said, yeah. Guy drove. So he was driving. So he drove. So they get to the after party. After party is somebody else's home because the parents were not there. So he's just alone. He's making an after party. Turns out there was one of the, you know, in school, there will always be those popular boys. One of the boys went to the girl and said, you know what, I think I like you. And they decided to go into the garage. They went in there, they did their deeds. And it looks like before they finished, another one was already waiting outside. And it turns out that there was a queue outside the garage. Everybody was saying, hey, there's a drunk girl inside. Let's just queue up here. And they went on. I'm thinking about 6 or 8. I didn't get the right number. Everybody else went in here, and the guy was so pissed off to say, you know, this girl, I took her to the matric, what, and she's not even considering me for number one. But the worst part is, what we were laughing about is there was one guy who had his eyes were crisscrossed like that, and it turns out he was the last one on the queue. So when it was his turn, horrible things. When it was his turn, girl woke up and said, not you. So instead of us saying, there's 8 guys that raped this girl, we're all laughing that, dude, even the girl who's super drunk, she can still wake up and see that you are crisscrossed eyes. And we're laughing about that. And I'm talking about this because this is no longer in primary. This is now high school. But the trauma of what I went through as I was growing up stayed with me. I never saw anything wrong. It's only now that we change the scene and we go into a different world that we start to talk about emotional therapy. What does it mean to talk about this? Then they come out to say, whoa, I was also accomplice to all of this because I never actually spoke out. I was not in the metric thingy. I was not there. I never saw them do that. But I should have just spoken up and said, no ways. I've heard you and you and you and you. A few months later, she shows up pregnant at school. Now they're laughing at her because they knew that there was a whole list. So since my high school was, known for such thing, girl had dropped out. I don't know if girl came back. I was in matric and I disappeared. I don't know if girl got the courage to enroll the following year. I don't know. I have no idea. So that becomes the story of Hazel and Sunny Boy, and Yizo-Yizo. And it's like reality. And I'm seeing that and I was watching Yizo-Yizo. For me, it was number one. I remember our TV gave in 1999 and we couldn't finish watching Yizo-Yizo. But all the people were saying, but our parents didn't want us to watch Yizo-Yizo. And I was like, but my mother allowed us to watch Yizo-Yizo. And now reflecting on it, I think she allowed it, even though we were staunch Christians. I mean, we were like hectic Seventh Adventists. We sang every night. We had a Bible verses. I had to prepare. Everybody, it's your turn. Prepare. We were like hectic Christians. But my mother allowed us at 8:30 to turn into Yizo-Yizo. And I think it's for this reason. What we saw there, and we were like, we did the same thing. And we would scream and talk about what we are seeing in our schools. Then she realized there her emotional thing, and I commented for that. Instead of banning it and allowing us to see it without her guidance outside, she allowed us to see it in the house so that she can actually go through what we go through on a daily basis. Because if your child is going through, is having a friend who's been raped, is having a friend who's been stealing in the shops, is having that friend who's doing all of those, you would never know about it. And things like, I know there are horrible shows, but such shows, and they had to tell you about how they live their life. Maybe your child is a rapist, and when he does that, he can totally confess and say, "Ish, and I raped 7 kids already." And you, as a parent, can take the action at the time. And I think that's what my mother allowed, because we could all sit there and then watch this immediately after our prayer session. I know we were having horrible dessert before we pray, and then we have Yizo-Yizo dessert and we go to bed. I wonder what we're dreaming about, heavenly angels or the education that we just got on Yizo-Yizo. I just did the reflection and I thought, let this be a good reflection for today. We can chat about it, and we'll do another one tomorrow.